You have to remember that we are in this new world order, which is the ex-China world order. And in that, there is no more unitary economy that can do things cheaper, faster, and better globally around the world.
In his most recent podcast, Chamath Palihapitiya shares his opinion regarding high inflation rates, the stock market, the crypto market, and the Fed.
What are your thoughts on Google's leadership specifically? Is Sundar the right person to run the company going forward? Does he have the founder authority to get the ship and to get the lieutenants all kind of rowing in the same direction? Or does there need to be a leadership change, which is the big discussion of topic in Silicon Valley right now?
I think he's very capable. That's an amorphous organization of so many different competing interests. The thing that doesn't add up about the Google earnings release, but then also what Freeberg just mentioned, is there was this article that kind of tried to paint Sundar as sort of a caretaker CEO, right? Where Larry was the actual shadow CEO. Well, if that's true, Larry has more incentive than anybody else to kind of force change. And there was all these kind of like gripes and complaints that were articulated. And I don't put much stock in all of this stuff. I think that he is the right person for the job. And I think what they have to do is just do the simple, basic things. Like, it doesn't take a CEO change for a board of directors to have the emotional wherewithal to authorize a 15 or 20% reduction in force for a company that is so profitable, that clearly is not yet humming on all cylinders. And so you don't need to go through all of this drastic change to do these simple, obvious things. My takeaway across all of these four big companies is we are in a really unique moment to observe something that may sound controversial or hurt people's feelings that like these companies. But I think we're now well past peak big tech. Their valuations may still go up because they generate such an enormous amount of cash flow. But these are exactly those kinds of businesses now. They are ex-growth, large cash flow businesses.
Blue chip, you might say?
Well, they were always blue chip, but the way that they grow is not through innovation. If you look at Google, Facebook, Microsoft, and Apple, and ask yourself, when was the last hugely disruptive thing that they've created? You're hard-pressed to find something that was even done in the 2010s.
Yeah, actually, that's a good thought. I mean, the iPhone for Apple.
iPhone was 2007.
Yep.
Microsoft was in the 1990s. Google was in 1998 with core search. Maybe there was Maps and Gmail in the 2000s.
Chrome, Android. They bought some of that.
Facebook, it was the core service that we built in the 2000s, and then they acquired brilliantly, right? So I'm not saying that they didn't acquire well.
Yeah.
My point is that core organic innovation hasn't been there for a long time. So this is a moment to just be reflective of the fact that these are some incredible companies with ginormous cash flows. But now you've had this foundational platform shift, which exposes the fact that they really aren't good at innovating. And at times when they've tried to organically innovate, they've massively misallocated capital.
Oculus would be the example of that.
Either through a bloated balance sheet, so some would claim that Google overspends, or through just pure misallocation by starting projects that just are not large, but consume large amounts of cash. That would be the Facebook VR example. But in all of this, I think when you cut staff and expenses as a way to meet and beat, and top-line growth is in the low single digits, it's an important moment to recognize that these companies have now transitioned to being cash cows. And if you look at sort of how financial markets value cash cows, they're very valuable, but it's not where you look for growth. And so in a world where rates eventually get cut and we start to come out of a recession, it tends to be that other people get rewarded. So that's an idea
and
that's
adding to your point here, they're not allowed to acquire things. Microsoft's acquisition
the Activision thing dead.
So they're not going to be allowed to buy stuff. So then you're right. What is the growth here? They're not able to innovate.
I think these companies are ex-growth, which is why they use their cash flows to do what? Borrow money cheaply to buy back stock, to manipulate their equity, right? You can manipulate and overcome dilution. You can manipulate earnings per share. You can manipulate the number of shares outstanding. And so just by the nature of that whole game, a bunch of passive investors will end up buying more, which helps the active investors who own that stock. So it's a game. So if we're not in the world where
financial engineering would be the most charitable way to say it.
We're in the financial engineering phase, which is fine. And by the way, you can make a lot of money. Facebook's up 90%. So there's a lot of meaning just this year.
Oh, yes.
So there's a lot of room for financial engineering, but it's not where you need to look to figure out where these big improvements and uses of this next generation platform technology are going to come from, most likely.
What do you think about the employment and participation situation and how that might unlock things? I also wanted to know from you, Chamath, this concept of the Fed is reacting to data just so slowly, and then you have these companies that maybe are more nimble and they have better data than the Fed.
I think that that's a truism, and I don't think anything about that is going to change. I mean, I think we talked about how these folks calculate non-farm payrolls or how they calculate CPI. It's incredibly outdated, right? It's people with clipboards walking around talking to people and checking boxes and filling out forms. Can that change? Probably it could. Will it change? It probably won't. And so they're going to focus on the most simple but most powerful measure that they have, which is controlling the money supply. Kind of what Sachs talked about. So they're going to manipulate the money supply to either put more liquidity in the system, in which case markets go up and asset prices go up, but then inflation goes up, or constrain liquidity, which then causes markets to go down, asset prices to go down, and inflation eventually to go down. The thing that we're facing today when you look at this labor market chart is a couple of things that I think we've talked about before, and I just want to reiterate them, which is you have to remember that we are in this new world order, which is the ex-China world order. And in that, there is no more unitary economy that can do things cheaper, faster, and better globally around the world, right? So we're going to nearshore or onshore all kinds of things that used to be done by the Chinese. They'll sit in Mexico or they'll sit in Central America. Maybe in some cases, they'll sit in Canada, and all of that will feed into the United States. The problem with all of that is that will keep costs higher because it'll be naturally more inefficient. It will naturally take more money, and that will naturally cause the prices of those things to be higher, which means that terminal inflation, I think, is just roughly higher. As a result, I think that more power, if you will, goes to labor. So in this constant tension that we have in an economy between labor and capital, the people that own the factories or the businesses and the people that run them and work inside of them, we've been in this position where the pendulum has swung so far towards capital, the owners, the shareholders, that all this financial engineering has tremendous upside, right? That's why companies engage in it. But when you show that chart, Jason, what it means is it's just really hard to find people. And so the only way you're going to get people off their butt to go into work, to sit in a chair, to do a job that you need them to do, is to pay them more. And in finding that, wages will have to go up. The counterbalance of that is what AI will do, which I think we all agree
to say that is the key. Yeah.
Which is massively deflationary. So that is going to be the tension that we're in now for a really long time as we explore this. I don't know if you guys saw today, but Sequoia led a $20 million round in this thing called Harvey.ai.
The legal,
which is like a legal super wizard for law firms.
Yeah, we knew that was coming.
And my partners and I were debating it. And what we thought of was, well, how much do you pay out of the $800 or $1,000 an hour that you charge to Harvey.ai? Maybe you're willing to pay 5% or 10%. But then the reality is that one of the most powerful things it does is it's able to go into Westlaw, find all these cases, and say, yeah, this is germane to the thing that you're working on right now. That's a very useful thing. But the N plus first law firm will also use that tool, and instead of charging $800 an hour, they'll say, we'll charge $600 an hour, and we're still willing to give you 5 or 10%. So I just don't see a world where, on the one hand, physical labor will continue to be more expensive. They'll demand more and more money to do the job that they're asked to do. And the knowledge work will become increasingly more deflationary because so much of it will be automated by AI that those folks will charge less and less. And there's going to be a tension there, and I don't exactly know what's going to happen.